One of the hardest things about going to Pokemon tournaments, cups, challenges, whatever, is picking the right deck. So today we're going to rank over 30 decks in the Obsidian Flame format to help you pick one. Hey, Nick from NAIC and TCG, and today we're going to be ranking, like I said, over 30 decks using Tier Maker. Thank you very much to Bob McDougall on Twitter for the template. If you want to go and make your own tier list, I have a link to it in the video description. Before we get started, most people watching are not subscribed to the channel, so I'm trying to reach 5,000 subs by the end of the year, and you can help that out. Just click the subscribe button, leave a like and a comment. Those things tell YouTube this is a good channel and other people should watch it. We're gonna get right to it. It's gonna take a second to do, and we're gonna rank 30 different decks for the Obsidian Flames format, so let's go. We're going to start with Arceus Duraludon, which I think is in a little bit of a weird spot. It has a lot of HP and it has a really good ability, Skyscraper. It can't be damaged by Pokemon that have any special energy attached. However, Chien-Pao doesn't use special energy, it hits really hard. Gardevoir doesn't use special energy, it hits really hard. Charizard doesn't use special energy, it hits really hard. So those decks that are all probably going to be a little popular, they can all get to the 330 damage mark to knock out your VMAX. They can all very easily knock out your Arceus V-Star. And you don't really get to make use of your Skyscraper ability. Path to the Peak is probably going to see an uptick in play. So the Arceus and the Duraludon both have something to worry about with the Skyscraper, with the Path to the Peak. So it's in a slightly weird spot. I also think Flying Pikachu, I think it's a little bit better than the Duraludon build, just because there's not as much Lugia. It's not even in Justin Basil's top 10. But the Flying Pikachu can hit things that are weak to Lightning, Palkia. It can hit the random Lugias that you encounter. And it can't be hit by basic Pokemon when you use Max Balloon. So that means Zacian V is not hitting it. Chien-Pao is not hitting it. Cramorant isn't going to hit it. Things like that. So you can kind of navigate some matchups a little bit better with the Flying Pikachu than you can the Duraludon, I think, right now. Regidrago, I think is very interesting. I think it's I think it's kind of good. I actually might put it behind Flying Pikachu because one of the things I've seen, I haven't really played it myself that much, is consistency issues. But when you get it going, I mean, you have access to Lost Impact, which hits super hard. You have access to G-Max Pulverization to shred. You have access to Rolling Iron to take less damage. You have some incredible attacks at your disposal if you can get it going. I'm actually going to put it a little bit below. I think Arceus decks are generally a pretty safe play, and depending, I guess we have a couple more over here. We'll just do like all the Arceus decks, I guess. The thing about Arceus decks is Turn 1 can be really iffy. Turn 2, if you don't have an Arceus V-Star, can be really, really scary. So you have to be able to get through those couple of turns. And if you do, you're probably okay. But if you don't, you're in a lot of trouble. So play the version that you know best. You have this Arceus Superior. It's an interesting strategy. Grass-type attacker to deal with the Charizard. But they probably have a Radiant Charizard or some other Fire-type attacker to deal with your Grass Superior. I'm not crazy about it. Arctina, I think, is a tier 1. I do think Arctina is tier 1. Simply because Judge Path is really good right now, as is being able to hit for 280 or just one-shotting every single Pokemon V-Star. You're one-shotting Stage 1 EXs very easily. You throw on the proper tool, and you're able to one-shot most Stage 2 EXs. So if you throw on Cleansing Gloves, you're able to knock out Mew VMAX and Gardevoir EX in one hit. It's very, very good. Umbreon I also think is high tier 2. Again, it's one of those things that's a little bit meta dependent. I don't know how much use the Umbreon is right now, and if people are really trying to deal with Charizard, which is a dark type Pokemon that's weak to grass, now your Umbreon kind of gets hit in that crossfire of being a grass weak dark type Pokemon. So I'm not super crazy about it at the moment. I'm probably going to put it below the Pikachu. I think Palkia is... these might get adjusted as we go. I think Palkia is really good, although I do like the Chien-Pao version better. Being able to search out the energies with the Chien-Pao, being able to accelerate them with Baxcalibur is really, really good. You have an incredibly high damage cap, and you can just one-shot all these big Stage 2 EXs, Pokemon VMAX pretty easily. So big fan of Chien-Pao, especially with the Arceus version. The Arceus Chien-Pao, that's kind of the difference between these. The Palkia is, you know, a 2-2 or a 3-3 Palkia line with like 2 Chien-Paos, and the Chien-Pao Excalibur is like 3 Chien-Paos and maybe a 1-1 or 2-2 Arceus. And the reason for the Arceus isn't to accelerate energies, but it's really to be just a consistency with the Starburst. But again, both of these fall pretty hard to something like Path to the Peak, so that is something to consider. Dialga Magnezone, I'm not a big fan of. I think if you know it really well, you could probably do well with it. But I'm not a big fan. I don't like the Zorobox. I think United Wings might be like top of tier 3. Again, it's one of those decks that I don't really know and I don't really like, but Alex Szymanski did really well with it at NAIC. It doesn't make it a bad deck. It just means it was a good pick. One person doing well with a deck doesn't mean the deck is good. It means they piloted it well at a particular tournament, making it a good pick for that individual event. But moving forward, I'm not super crazy about it. There's a lot of Lost Zone. Speaking of, we'll just go straight to the Tier S deck, I think, is going to be Lost Zone Giratina. There's a ton of it right now, and something like United Wings just can't handle it. So, it really doesn't handle a lot of Lost Zone decks very well, honestly. So, for that reason, I think the United Wings kind of falls into a pretty bad spot. But if you're able to dodge the first round or two Lost Zone decks, they start tying with each other, and now you can kind of go into a different bracket, if you will, where you're not dealing with Lost Zone decks. So there are ways to make it happen. Gardevoir is another Tier S deck. It's just so good. I think it's really consistent. It can hit really hard, and just kind of does the same thing over and over again. It's just solid. Great draw, great energy acceleration, really good damage output. Path to the Peak can be kind of annoying, but that you can get around it. You can probably throw a Pumpkaboo in there. Now you have Level Ball, Ultra Ball, Fog Crystal. Those are always the search for something like a Pumpkaboo to bump that Path to the Peak out of the way if you really need it. So, I'm not as big of a fan of the Gardevoir Mewtwo. I'm not a really big fan of Tyranitar here. I think Tyranitar gets a lot better with Dodrio from 151, but as of right now, not a big fan. Gardevoir Path to the Peak, I think, is pretty interesting. Fusion Mew, we're going to put a top of tier 1. I think we should leave it at two tier S's. Sableye it's stupid. It's really stupid, and the Dragonite version is very, very good. Single Strike Lugia, I think it's just barely tier 1, which makes me a little bit upset. It's just a little bit inconsistent. It's a little high rolly. You have to be able to hit your capturing aromas. You have to hope you don't prize your Burnett. Maybe you run 2, and then later in the game, that second Burnett feels kind of bad to draw. I'm not a fan of Mimikyu Control. I'm not a fan of Regigigas. I'm not a fan. I think Rapid Strike Urshifu is probably tier 1. Meowscarada, I think it's tier 2, simply because it has good weakness with the Charizard. If it sees play, if it doesn't see play, it's not that good. I think Miraidon's a surprise. I think it's top of tier 2. What else we got? Shadow Rider's probably a tier 3. It's probably a little bit better than the Dragonite. I think Charizard's definitely top of tier 2. Again, same thing that Gardevoir has. It has really good energy acceleration in the form of the ability, and has really good damage output, but your opponent does have to take some prizes for that damage to start to ramp up, which is a little unfortunate. Sometimes you miss a KO just because you do base 180. So the early game can be kind of weird if you don't have like a choice belt attached, or you could attack with Arceus, and now you're doing 200, but you still might be missing that KO at times. So you have to let your opponent KO things, which they'll naturally do over the course of the game, but you don't want to be whiffing KOs because your opponent didn't take enough prizes. So that can be kind of a problem. I think that's consistency and the heavy reliance on abilities. A well-timed path that just sticks, and you're done. Your deck just crumbles, and you will lose, and it's happened to me. I think Goodra The problem with Lost Zone Goodra is, again, Chien-Pao hits really hard, Gardevoir hits really hard, Giratina is super good and very popular, and all those decks can beat if they can overcome the damage cap that something like Lost Goodra can impose, whereas in the past other decks kind of couldn't, but now they can, and because they can, it's not that great. Charizard can deal with this. A lot of these, Duraludon just shreds right through the ability, so not ideal. I'm not a huge Sablezard fan personally. I think it's good, and if you know how to play it, it's great. But I just don't like Sablezard that much. I've been burned by it too many times. I think the colorless Lugia is probably here. It's good. It's gonna get a little bit better in future sets, but right now it just doesn't have the same damage output that the Single Strike version has. Single Strike has Tyranitar to hit really hard, and it's a basic good typing. It has Urshifu, which is good typing, hits incredibly hard and shreds. I think it's just a better version of Lugia if you're gonna play it. DTE Mew is probably top of tier 2. I'm not as big of a fan right now because Mew won Worlds. It's gonna be at the forefront of their minds as they start to come back to these major tournaments, cups, challenges, things like that. So people are probably gonna have a Mew counter, whether it's just a single Spiritomb, whether they're gonna have a Drapion, something like that. The Fusion Mew can deal with things like Spiritomb better, or deal with things like Klefki better, because Fusion Strike Energy says that it's not the Pokemon that's the Fusion Strike Pokemon this card is attached to isn't affected by your opponent's Pokemon abilities. So Spiritomb comes in play and says basic Pokemon V have no abilities. You attach a Fusion Strike Energy to one of your Genesect, and now all of a sudden it does have its ability because the Fusion Strike Energy overrides Spiritomb. So that's what makes this a little bit better. Plus the ability to just donk an opponent with a Meloetta turn 1 going second is very, very strong. And Fusion Mew, it has its merits. It has the, what does it have? It has Judge Path. You can very easily do that, which is a pretty good combo at the moment. I just think if you hit a Spiritomb or if you hit a Mew counter, you could be a little bit dead in the water, which especially with Path to the Peak being popular, if the Mew player has to be the one to put the path in play. You don't want someone to path you out before you're ready for it. So that's something to keep in mind. And something the Fusion Mew has to deal with as well. Toedscruel, I don't like it. I think it's probably somewhere here. Vespiquen's garbage. Vespiquen's straight garbage. I'm gonna go ahead and say Glamour is a mid tier 2. I think it's a pretty decent deck. You can catch people off surprise. Fighting is a good weakness to hit with some lightning types. Miraidon's running around. Arceus running around being an ever-present deck. And the ability is really good. You can it really hurts things like Lost Zone decks. It hurts Chien-Pao decks. Lugia often has stuff on the bench. I mean, it probably doesn't hurt Lugia too much. Gardevoir has big benches. Like I said, the Lost Zone decks have big benches. Mew has a big bench. So what the Glamour does is it says that each player can't have more than 3 Pokemon, or I think it's your opponent can't have more than 3 Pokemon on their bench, which is devastating for Gardevoir and Lost Zone especially, and like I said, even Mew. So these decks, they can't have the full board that they want, and then you just slowly chip away 140 damage plus poison, and you play Path of the Peak, and you play Iono, and you play Judge, and then you have the Lunatone Solrock so that you're not affected by stadiums, which means you can have Path of the Peak in play and still have your Glamour's ability active, because Lunatone and Solrock, when they're both in play, prevent your Pokemon from being affected by stadiums. So that's really, really cool. Hisuian Sneasler, its ability, which puts 2 more poison damage counters on your opponent's active Pokemon, that stays in effect. So you can really do some good work and really take a slow game. I think this is probably a little bit better in something like a challenge where you're playing best of 1 and you don't have to worry about the time as much. Best of 3 might be a little hard when you're playing kind of a slower, grindier game, trying to wear your opponent down. Something to consider, but that's just me. I think Arc Pidgeot is probably pretty good, but I don't think it's been tested enough. I haven't seen enough results. Doesn't mean that there hasn't been enough results. I haven't seen enough results to make this good, but it has the makings of a cool deck between Sharon's Care, and you could search a deck for anything you want between Arceus and Pidgeot every turn. Really, really cool. I think it's a great deck. I'm going to say tier 3, probably. Somewhere in there. And then Tinglu is probably end of tier 2. Like I said, most decks are going to fall into tier 2. That's just how bell curves work. But the thing about Tinglu is that you can play it very similar to a Glimmora deck, turn into a slower, grindier game. You have the Flying Entry Hawlucha that's going to put 1 damage counter on 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon. And then when Tinglu is in the active, those Pokemon, non-EX Pokemon, I should say, they don't have abilities if they have damage counters on them. You can run Path to the Peak to turn off those EX abilities and have Lunatone Soul Rock in play so that your opponent can't, your Tinglu's ability stays, but again, your opponent's abilities go. I think it's really, I think it's a little underrated, but again, this hasn't seen the success to make me put it higher, though I think the potential is there. But yeah, that's all the decks. We did it a little bit faster than I expected, so I'm happy about that. Personally, if I was going to go to a cup or a challenge tomorrow, the deck that I would probably play, obviously I'm very comfortable with Lugia Single Strike. I've been playing it. I've played it since before rotation happened. That's how long I've been playing Single Strike Lugia. Before it became popular post-rotation, I was playing it. I think Chien-Pao is very good. I think Arceus is a safe play. If you are comfortable with turns that require a lot of sequencing and a lot of decision making, and you want to play Giratina or Gardevoir, by all means go for it. I don't have enough experience with them to pick them up and just be like, yeah, I'm going to play these successfully or play them well. I'd be careful about Charizard. It's people are talking about it on Twitter. It's known. A lot of people are talking about it being really good, so people might pick it up just to play because it's new, and Charizard is a fan favorite, so it might have a target on its back a little bit. I think Miraidon's kind of a sleeper. I think Miraidon, especially the version that Andrew Mahone played to Worlds, is a pretty good pick. It has Path to the Peak in there. So yeah, if I had to pick 3 though, 3 decks, it'd probably, in order, Single Strike Lugia, Chien-Pao, and probably Arctina, or like an Arc Flying Pika, an easy Arc deck that I know. It has a pretty simple strategy. It's Arc, partner Pokemon V, accelerate energy to your partner Pokemon V, and then just do whatever, prevent basics from attacking, or hit really hard with Giratina, play Path Judge, and just kind of try to lock your opponent out of the game while chipping away or just obliterating whatever they have from the field. So those are the 3 things that I would play: Lugia Single Strike, Chien-Pao, or an Arc Pile. And I call it Arc Pile even though I think Arceus X are better than people give them credit for, so be on the lookout for them. But there you go, over 30 decks ranked. So there you have it. I literally said it a second ago, over 30 decks ranked, and we did it pretty quickly. I want to know from you, though, if you will go into a cup or a challenge, what deck would you play? What deck do you think I did? How do you feel about the rating? Do you think I did a good job? Do you think, what would you change in this tier list? I want to hear from you, but that is going to do it for us today. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, found this informative. If you did, help me get to my goal of 5,000 subscribers by the end of the year by liking, commenting, and of course subscribing. All those things are super helpful. Let me know what you want to see next. If there's something that you want to see me cover, tell me in the comments. But that's going to do it for us today. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time. I want to give a special shout out to the YouTube members: Black Wins, Mike the Highest, Fernando Ortiz, Chin Pokemon, and Eric N. Thank you all so much for your support. It really means a lot to me. And if you want to become a channel member, you can go ahead and click the channel member button somewhere at the bottom of the page. I'm not really sure. I haven't done it myself.